We're live on Facebook right here and also on Instagram over here. And this is me, Brittany Boles, here with chapter 17 of my book, Finding Starlight. This is the book that I wrote about my life as told through the lens of a past life regression session. It is a true story of all of the traumatic things and crazy things that happened to me and the way that I interpreted them and hopefully the way that I healed through them. This book is triggering. Tonight specifically, there will be graphic drug abuse and some sexual scenes. I can't really remember what else, but in general, just assume that every chapter will be triggering and be aware of your own triggers. And please reach out to me or anybody else if you ever need to talk. You can DM me. People do that all the time. Or just post your comments. This book is not published yet, although I am very much working toward that. Querying agents. Sam Stoloff, I'm still looking at you. And trying to get Ellen DeGeneres and or Reese Witherspoon to notice me because of their amazing work telling women's stories. So that is me. Again, my name is Brittany Boles. This is chapter 17 of my unpublished book, Finding Starlight. And prior chapters can be found on my website at brittanyboles.com. Here we go. Chapter 17. Love like drugs. It didn't take long after leaving Blair's house for me to insert myself back in Dad and Amber's lives, I said. One day, I just walked into his room. He was sitting on the floor watching TV like he does every day, rolling cigarettes and drinking beer, and he looked mildly surprised to see me. I had been calling for a week to no avail. So, in I walked and stood directly in front of the TV. He goes, "What do you want?" And I squared my shoulders and said, "It's time for this bullshit to end. You're my dad. I'm your daughter. What's done is done, and this is over. Unless you want to have it out right now, we're making up." Katrina laughed. Oh my, what did he say? He said, "I heard you spent all your money." She gasped. He didn't. Yeah, that's what he said. "I heard you spent all your money." So I told him, "Sure, I guess you could say that." He seemed to have expected this visit, relieved that I was taking the matter into my own hands. It was a totally different dynamic than when I had left. We were on equal ground now, both adults, nobody in charge. He sensed it as much as I did. He offered me a joint, which we smoked together, and then I gave him a hug and left. That was that, I shrugged. That was that, she repeated. It was, I nodded. It was much harder making up with Amber than it was confronting Dad. She and I had a long, broken road to repair. I had missed a very important time in her life, and I still to this day don't know all of what she faced after I left. I know it was not easy. But you two are strong, Katrina said. You're connected. You made it. I agreed. We did. So what happened then? How did you get out of the hole? She asked. Oh, I laughed, shaking my head and holding up my hands. I dug it a lot deeper first. I was coming to love the brilliant way that she turned my attention to give me new perspective on old stories. In fact, I cocked my head to the side as I thought about her question. It had been a long time since I talked about Dan. I was 19 years old when I met Dan. Not long after I left Blair's house. My favorite song at the time was as angsty as I was, full of passion and desperation. I began. "Oh, hey, Cloud," I called sweetly. It was floating where the waterfall met the pool, almost like they were having a conversation. Such a strange place. It left the pool and came to me, tilting up toward my face as if to ask what I wanted. Do you think you could help male singer and heavy, soulful guitar riffs? Don't worry, I'm not going to sing it to you. Nobody needs that today. I see nothing in your eyes, and the more I see, the less I like. Is it over yet? Let me in. You take the breath right out of me. You left a hole where my heart should be. You got to fight just to make it through, 'cause I will be the death of you. I raised my eyebrows, impressed with this new trick. Looking at Katrina, I wasn't sure she loved it. That made me laugh more than it should have. She waited patiently while I got a hold of myself. Then I tried to answer the initial question. At that point in my life, after everything that had happened with Blair, I was defeated. I believed I was broken. I was afraid that anyone who came near me would be poisoned by whatever was wrong with me, whatever was ruining my life. I was hopeless until I met Dan. I think it was our mutual belief that we were broken that drew us together. Falling in love with Dan had a way of ripping me apart from the inside. That song predicted it perfectly. How we would find the fire in each other's eyes, but that it would destroy us in the end. Looking back, the whole thing still feels tragic. Dan and I used to communicate through the songs that we liked. We were both into deep, melodic, angry rock and roll. I thought it was so romantic and intimate. He would shyly approach me, his long, dark hair almost covering gigantic brown eyes, and gaze at me with such admiration. He liked to surprise me with some song or another, watching to see how I would react. He always smiled like he had a secret. We were really playful together, at first. I paused in surprise as another song started playing from the cloud, my little rock and roll accomplice. This one was by Papa Roach. Because days come and go, but my feelings for you are forever. To Katrina, over the music, I said, it sounds romantic, but it's actually a horribly sad song about a man looking back at his life and realizing that he'll never get over or forgive a lost love. The song continued with, in the brightest hour of my darkest day, I realized what is wrong with me. Can't get over you, can't get through to you. It's been a helter-skelter romance from the start. My eyes filled with tears as I listened and remembered. Even Katrina seemed affected by this one. Although it had been lifetimes since Dan and I had said our final goodbye, it was still difficult to think of him. There was no part of me that wanted to return to that relationship, and I had long since given up the idea that we might come back around. Too much had changed. I understood it all so much more clearly now than I had at the time. Still, it weighed on me. I recalled words I had written during the height of the mess. Tornadic, and with the violence of Pompeii, the two fate-tossed, star-crossed, completely lost, forever victimized, had each other so hypnotized. Lovers' dance of destruction was difficult to watch. And as the emerald city they had built did crumble to the ground beneath their feet, he looked at her, she looked at him, and neither one of them could feel complete. We fell in love quickly, with enormous passion and devotion. He was an artist, would have been an animator if he'd finished school. He once painted a life-sized mural on our bedroom wall. It was an orc, sort of like a hulking demon man, carrying a naked woman over his shoulder. I laughed, realizing it was pretty symbolic, really, even if he didn't mean for it to be. I was helpless to fight against my demons. I was being totally carried away. We both had vices. His was an obsession with the digital world, video games. And mine was... I paused. Could I point to just one vice during that point in my life? Mine was a lot of things, I suppose. I did some drugs and drank too much, definitely. I started having anxiety attacks and became depressed. I couldn't figure out why I felt so lonely and unhappy while simultaneously being surrounded by friends and deeply in love. I went to a doctor who diagnosed me with severe chronic depression and anxiety and gave me medication. Things with Dan started to spiral out of control. He pulled away from me, making me beg for attention. I discovered that he had been having an emotional affair with a coworker, and we began to fight. I experimented with harder drugs, trying to self-medicate my pain. I started to spend time with a different group of people. We were really into the party scene, going to clubs and raves all the time. One night, I got high on a new drug and slept with another man. It is the worst thing I have ever done. When I confessed to Dan the next day, my heart tore in half. I felt guilty, ashamed, mortified. I was disgusted, angry that I could act so selfishly, and absolutely devastated by the pain I was causing him. I still loved him and wanted nothing more than to start over and fight our way to happiness. It was all too much for me. The drugs, the guilt, feeling torn between two men, and the medication, it was a recipe for disaster. Every day, I fantasized about overdosing on drugs or driving my car into a wall. I wanted to die, and Dan was crumbling into pieces before my eyes. I was destroying him. As I poured out this story for Katrina, I felt the weight of it settle onto my chest. The memories were vivid. Me discovering Dan's affair, begging for his love and attention. Dan sitting at his computer while I pretended to sleep, wishing for him to look my way while I hid my tears. Me telling him what I had done, watching the light in his eyes extinguish. Me, crushing a pill into white powder and snorting it through my nose, hating myself. The many nights I laid with the other man knowing that Dan was somewhere else loving me. It was like I was living two lives at the same time. I tried to explain to Katrina. I needed her to understand, or maybe it was myself I was trying to convince. On one hand, I was deeply, unhealthily in love with Dan. We had both hurt each other repeatedly, but we were drawn to each other. We tried and failed to repair it, fix each other, love each other, but every time was like an explosion, as destructive as it was bright. At the same time, I had left Dan and was living with the other man. Art. Art had been connected to my family for many years, and we had made a mess of everything. We were severely addicted to OxyContin, a prescription painkiller that it's essentially heroin. And we clung to each other like life rafts. I had never been more confused or out of control in my entire life. We're going to pause for just a second because Instagram over here is almost out of battery. And there are some people that only watch on that platform. Oh dear God. And now it did something to Facebook. What in the actual... Okay. We're just going to figure this out. Like little by little, we're just going to make mistakes. We're going to do a bunch of drugs. We're going to figure it out. We're going to ruin our family structure. Instagram is crooked as shit right now. That's okay too. All right. good pause. We sometimes need to just chill out for a second in this book, I think. Here we go. We're back. I had never been more confused or out of control in my entire life. Searching for a way to explain the mystery. Okay. Yikes. Instagram, I'm so sorry. Stay. Instagram just fell down. We're really going to be okay. Here we go. I'd never been more confused or out of control in my entire life, I said, and then the phone crashed to the floor. Searching for a way to explain the misery and confusion that was my relationship with art, I recalled a conversation I had with my sister, Amber. My sister was angrier with me at that point than she had ever been, even after I left her at Dad's house, I said. I was a compulsive liar, a total addict. I made plans and then bailed. I left her hanging all the time. Our whole family was pissed at me. See, Art wasn't just a guy. He had been my cousin Lisa's long-term boyfriend. 10 years they were together. I met Art when I was just a kid. Nikki and Lisa are sisters, remember? So we all basically grew up like siblings and were super close. When Art and Lisa broke up, I was spending a ton of time with all of them, doing drugs and partying. That whole friend group was my escape from my misery at home with Dan. Then stuff started falling apart for everyone. Nikki's boyfriend died. That is a whole different story. But it was awful. At that same time, I was on all sorts of antidepressants. Art was the source of most of the drugs we were all doing, and he introduced me to snorting Oxy for the first time. That night, after the first time I ever tried it, was when I cheated on Dan with him. Then things spun out of control. Lisa and I had the worst fight I've ever had, ever. Everything was a mess. Amber took me out for coffee one day and unleashed on me. She was crying, begging me to leave Art. She was telling me she had no idea who I even was anymore. And asking how could I do that to Lisa and to myself? I was lying to her again, telling her that I had quit using and that I was really happy. I said I couldn't help who I loved, which was such a lie, because I was ripped apart, completely out of control. She knew it, and I couldn't admit it to her. She said if I didn't stop lying and leave Art, she wasn't going to talk to me anymore. And at that point, I don't think that I even cared. I shook my head. It was hard to believe that that had been my life. On one hand, the guilt, shame, and sadness felt as tangible as if it had all happened yesterday. On the other hand, I knew that I was a different person now than I had been then. Katrina was nodding along, holding space and silence for me, letting my words wash over her. I felt like I really needed her to see what it was like. There was no way to describe it that she could possibly understand, I thought. She's too good, too kind and whole. That kind of debauchery has never touched her. Do you want to see it? See what I was like living with Art? I asked, staring into her eyes and daring her to look away. She held my gaze. I want to see it if you want to show it to me, she said evenly. The cloud reanimated with a bit of hesitation, like it wasn't sure that it wanted to play along. It's okay, I said to it, or maybe to all of us. It's over now, but I want to see it one more time. 8 neatly cut and evenly spaced lines of powder stood in a row on the glass-topped table. The room was dimly lit. 4 drinks, vodka and Red Bull, sat in glasses nearby. Art, brawny and bare-chested under a military-style haircut with slanted gray eyes, smiled crookedly and handed me a rolled-up $100 bill. "Go ahead," he said over blaring music. I was nearly naked in a black push-up bra and miniskirt, with manicured red nails and dark eye makeup. My hair was dyed black, with blue and purple streaks cut just below my shoulders and straightened. It was my almost 21 look. A black tattoo of demon wings glistened with sweat between my shoulder blades as I bent my head to the table and snorted one of the lines. I sat up and sucked in air through my teeth, holding my head in both hands and shaking it from side to side. I made a face and grabbed for my drink, taking a huge gulp before saying, "It burns." Art laughed and said, "Burns so good. Here, you have to even it out." Before I could take the bill he was offering, a wave of nausea washed over me. All the color drained from my face and my eyes swam. I got up on shaky legs and ran to the bathroom to vomit. Luckily, I didn't have much in my stomach at the time. It was a few quick heaves and a flush. I washed my hands and mouth, fixed my makeup, and walked back to the living room. 1 line remained on the table waiting for me. "I hate it when that happens," I told them. They nodded in agreement. Art handed me the rolled-up 100. I leaned back down to the table and inhaled the powder. This time I kept it down with a determined sip of my cocktail. The clouds swirled to another night in the same room. Instead of drinks, bottles of water littered the surface of the table. I was dressed in a tight, sheer piece of lingerie with my hair pulled up off my neck. My breasts were pushed up, and the tiny panties I wore accentuated the curve of my barely covered butt. Art was clad only in black silk shorts, as was his friend. They sat on the couch with legs open, watching me dance with my extremely sexy friend. She was tall, slender, and delicately framed. A pleated black skirt hid nothing at the top of her legs. She wore a corset and her boyfriend's hat. A true model, with high cheekbones and perfect skin, her beauty eclipsed my own shorter, curvier shape. We were high on ecstasy that night, smiling and wild-eyed, sweating and swallowing. A Britney Spears album played over the sound system. My friend and I had won the music war by promising the guys a show, and we didn't disappoint. I sauntered over to Art, straddling his leg and pressing my breasts into his face. He reached around to cup my ass, and I spun, slapping his knee and bending close enough to his mouth for him to taste me. Moving like a stripper, I teased and taunted him until he was rigid with anticipation. Then my friend and I switched partners and repeated the lap dance. When her boyfriend got uncomfortably handsy with me, a problem I'd had with him before, I danced away and declared that it was time for a smoke break. The guys needed to cool off, I said. And so did we. The frigid air in the garage where we went for cigarettes snapped us out of it momentarily. We smoked quickly and returned to the living room, where Art was packing a bowl of weed. His friend was upstairs, jerking off. Another day appeared on the cloud. Art's bedroom was filled with morning light. I lay on the bed, naked and panting, with his head between my legs. The makeup on my face and the gleam in his eyes suggested we'd been up all night, which we had. He moved to enter me, and I clutched him with the breathless ecstasy that the drug induced. We finished, shivering and gasping together. He rolled off me, tattooed chest shining with perspiration, and reached for a pipe on the nightstand. I got up and walked to the bathroom. My body had lost some of its curve, and my belly was hollow beneath the lines of my ribs that had started to show. I placed my hands on the sink and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were as black as my hair. "What am I doing?" I whispered to my reflection, voice hoarse and thin. Eyes full of loathing. I leaned my face closer to the glass, staring hard. "Jesus Christ," I muttered, expression dripping with contempt. "I look just like her. I have become my mother." A familiar wave of nausea came for me, and I kneeled at the base of the toilet, hugging the porcelain with both arms. My head hung into the bowl, inches from the water. I dry heaved, expelling only yellow bile. Hot tears streamed down my face as I gasped for air between convulsions. Finally, with a violent shake, some liquid came up and out of my mouth, and with it, 3.5 undigested red tablets. When the shaking stopped, I stood and stared at the drugs in the water, shaking my head. How many of those fucking things did I take? I asked myself. It was the end of a bender. 2 or 3 nights of drugs, drinking, and partying by my guess. I wasn't even sure how long I'd been awake or when I had last eaten anything other than pills. With a disgusted headshake, I flushed them and started my cleaning up routine. I had just finished brushing my teeth when Art came in. "Are you okay?" he asked, naked body perking up at the sight of me. "I just threw up like 4 pills, I answered. "Guess you didn't need them after all," he said, handing me the pipe, which I took gratefully. Weed was always our answer to an upset stomach, and it usually worked. As I lit and inhaled, he kneeled and began kissing me below the belly. Over his head, with one hand in his short, dark hair, I mouthed, "What the fuck is wrong with me?" The scene changed to the old room I had shared with Dan. The mural, not quite finished, stood out on the wall like a scarlet letter. I was there to get the last of my things, hiding my thin body beneath a black scarf and jacket. He sat watching me from his computer chair, barefoot, with his unkempt, half-wild mane tangled above sad eyes. "I like your new hair," he said, walking over to finger a freshly dyed lock. "It looks good on you." "You look good." "Dan, I can't. Please don't," I stuttered, choking on the tears that threatened to consume me. "Here, take this," he said, and handed me a stunningly beautiful glass pipe. It was an intricate, elaborate design by a local glassblower that I had splurged on for his birthday. "I'm not taking that," I said, hurt. "It was a gift. I want you to have it." He considered it, then walked back over to his desk and opened the drawer where he kept his herb. "Then at least smoke it with me one last time," he said. One last time. The words cut me like a knife. I sat on the edge of the bed, not trusting my legs. He came to sit beside me and handed me the piece, which I lit and admired. Holding in the smoke like it would save me, I looked anywhere but at him. His fingers brushed mine intentionally as he took the pipe from me. The contact was electric. Our eyes met. His were warm and brown, fully alive and rich with emotion. So different than Art's glassy grays. I couldn't look away, and he didn't want me to. He placed the glass on the nightstand and brought his hand to my face, With one thumb, he stroked away a freshly fallen tear. Without breaking eye contact, he placed his full lips over mine, drinking in my pain with a tender, hungry mouth. My tears fell freely, mixing with the taste of him. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me tightly, kissing me deeply. With a gasp and a hand on his chest, I pulled away. He wasn't having it. Relentless, raw fervor was his style. It left me breathless. Strong hands lifted me easily and placed me further back onto the bed. Hot eyes bore into mine, demanding that I meet his passion with my own. Like a wild animal, he sprang up and over me, crouching with his mouth a mere centimeter from mine, waiting. I was pinned, not by his body, but by his intensity. I looked away, struggling for self-control, and his hand returned to its entirely too familiar place on my cheek, turning me to stare at him. He hadn't moved, and he was daring me to answer his gaze. "You love me," he growled, placing his forehead against my own. His lips were so close. I said, not knowing what to say. "Yes, I love you," my heart was screaming. "I can't hurt you anymore," I finished, using every ounce of courage just to use my voice. "Does this hurt?" he asked, running the tip of his tongue across my lower lip. I gasped. It was enough for both of us. Our bodies knew each other too well. He devoured me with a deep, animalistic kiss, growling from the back of his throat as he made quick work of my scarf, coat, and clothes. When I was nearly bare beneath him, he rose onto his knees and paused, drinking in the sight. Lowering his head so that his hair fell onto my skin, he licked all of my newly hollow spots, claiming or reclaiming territory he had sorely missed. Each touch of his tongue was a lash of absolution. My body arced and begged for him, and we came together like legions on a battlefield. After, his tenderness returned. He cradled my head in the crook of his arm and traced my eyes with gentle fingertips. Once more, tears fell from them in cascades, but I did not look away. I have to believe that every cold, hard heart has its day to soul sigh and lamentation of the things that heart has pushed away. The words scrolled across the cloud in my own handwriting, a memory of another day. Later in the saga of sex and drugs, Dan and Art. I was writing in a notebook in Art's living room, contemplating the depth of my despair. Art, having nodded off again, was slumped over on the couch. The sports channel played on his gigantic television. I turned the page and furiously began to scrawl another piece. "I can see it in your eyes, unfocused and half-closed. The wrinkle in your smile says you wouldn't have supposed that anyone could figure out just how wrong it went. You think that you're deceiving us, that we're all off your scent. We were trying to quit together, or so he said," I explained to Katrina. We'd started weaning off the massive doses of oxy we had been taking, and it weighed on us. I was bringing portioned pills into work. It would sneak into the bathroom 4 or 5 times a day just to keep going. Art taught me to flush the toilet when I needed to mask the sound of crushing and snorting. Every day I managed to take less and less. I was getting sick, sleepless, and weak, but he was the same as he had always been. I was just able to see it better. The cloud zoomed in on the words I was still writing. Clearly in your ragged breath and lackluster take on life, a sickened song of sorrow tells a tale of wasted life. Somber, self-inflicted self-sufficiency is slipping through the cracks. You're nodding off in public and you're more than just relaxed. He could barely keep his eyes open these days. He'd have paranoid delusions, getting pissed at me for some imaginary thing he decided was true, or he'd sit for hours with a song just blasting on repeat, staring at the computer. He was barely there. I was horrified to go anywhere in public with him because he would so often looked like he was just falling asleep. Mercifully, the cloud moved on to another memory. I was pacing in the living room, clutching my phone, looking panicked. Art had left in a rage of screeching tires hours earlier. He walked through the door, stumbling and bleary-eyed. I said, "What the fuck? You've been gone for hours. You're high. I can't even talk to you like this. Jesus Christ, Art, we're supposed to be getting our shit together." He shouted back at me, "You don't know what I'm going through right now. I don't even know who you are anymore. You won't even look at me." "I can't look at you," I screamed, storming away from him and up the stairs. He followed, blinded by anger and intoxication. "I'm leaving," I said, and walked into the bedroom. "No, you are fucking not," he growled, following me. He grabbed my wrist and spun me to face him. "Let go," I shouted, yanking back my hand and stumbling into the wall. He advanced toward me, glaring down through blurred fury. "You cannot leave," he said. "I can do whatever the fuck I want," I spat back. He roared, lifted his fist and slammed it into the wall just to the side of my head, shattering the drywall and peppering me with dust. I froze, still with shock for a second, and then shoved him in the chest, hard. He backed up, momentarily sobered. "I'm sorry," he began. "Don't." I said it dangerously. I squared my shoulders and took a step toward him, narrowing my eyes. "You do not get to treat me like this. Not ever. Not even once. I am done." The venom in my voice hung in the air for a moment as the cloud turned dark, crackling with sparks like lightning. "To Katrina," I said. I left him that day. I got clean, and oh my God, it felt like I was dying. I could hardly walk. I was so weak and sick. My skin crawled. I couldn't sleep. It's just like you see in the movies, but worse. "Wow," she breathed. "How long did all this go on? How long did you live with Art?" "Well," I said, trying to remember, "I was with Dan for 2 years. From 19 to 20, I lived with Art for a few months around my 21st birthday." "So much, so fast," Katrina said. "It really was," I agreed. "And there's more. During all of this, I nearly killed myself. I was 21 when I decided that I didn't want to live anymore," I told her. "This was it. I was too weak, too alone. I couldn't live with myself. The shame, the guilt, the weight of the love I had for Dan, and my disgust with becoming, in my eyes, my own mother. It was too much." "You did not choose to end your own life," Katrina said. "Why not?" That was an odd question, I thought. I wondered how many other people had ever been asked, "Why didn't you kill yourself?" I will never forget the moment that I realized that I really, genuinely wanted to die. I lay on the floor of the bathroom, too weak to leave and too sick to be far from the toilet. All I could think about was death. I knew the medicine cabinet held a plethora: antidepressants, stimulants, nausea medication, sleep aids, muscle relaxers. I hated myself for opening the cabinet at all. I couldn't think straight. The easiest choice seemed to be to take a bunch of different pills and just lay down. I wanted it so badly. but Nikki's face kept swimming in front of my eyes. I pictured her showing up to find me, and I just knew I couldn't do that to her. Only a few months before this, Nikki's boyfriend, the father of her unborn child, had killed himself. It was devastating. Nikki had a newborn, healthy, beautiful baby boy who would never meet his dad. She had made me his godmother. I took the role as a huge, serious honor. So as I lay on the floor, sick and sad and wanting to die, all I could think was that Nikki's boyfriend had stolen my suicide. Now I couldn't do it, and I hated him for taking my escape. I had never been sicker in my life, could not stop throwing up, and I was getting scared. I didn't trust myself to be alone, so I picked up the phone and called Nikki to take me to the hospital. When we got there, I explained to the caseworker and the doctor that I was afraid if I was left alone, I would kill myself. I told them, I know it sounds crazy, but I just don't trust myself. They admitted me to the hospital psychiatric ward. It was the week before Christmas. I needed to be locked up, taken away from everything and anyone, everything and everyone that I could use to... I needed to be locked up, taken away from everything and everyone I could use, or hurt, or use against myself, I said, breathing a deep sigh. And that concludes chapter 17 of my book, Finding Starlight. It is a true story, the story of my life as I remember it, told through the lens of a past life regression session. And before I let you go, I know this is probably the longest video yet, I just want to say a word about this, about addiction and getting your shit together. Obviously, I'll talk more about this in the book as the story continues to unfold, but that me that was throwing up undigested ecstasy pills and snorting 80 milligrams of Oxycontin a day is the same me that today went to my nonprofit job, talked about how to change the lives of New Hampshire children, practiced yoga, hiked a mountain, shared this story with you, and is totally okay. If I can go from that girl to this woman, anybody can do it. Do not give up. Do not give up. When I quit Oxycontin, I couldn't even walk. Today, I ran down a mountain. I'm here for you. I believe in you. And I'm not any stronger than you are. We all can do it. I promise. Thank you so much for watching. Please DM me, ask for help if you're anywhere near that place. Don't fucking kill yourself. Stop using drugs, and everything's going to be fine. Again, I'm here for you, and you can comment, DM, etc. Okay. I will see you next week, next Wednesday, with chapter 18 of my book, Finding Starlight. Thank you for watching. I love you.